I'm here with Larry Ortega of Community Union, and we are going to be talking about 5G and the digital divide. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate to be here.
So, does 5G bridge the digital divide? Let's cut to the chase.
You want the short answer or the long answer?
I want it all.
I'll give you the short answer. The short answer is absolutely not, right? It doesn't even come close. The long answer is that 5G, the whole selling of they sell 5G, it's being sold as the thing that's going to close the digital divide. It's basically just the next new shiny nickel, right? It's the next new little gimmick thing that the telecoms are pushing out, and they've really seized on the pandemic, right, as an excuse to, you know, bring this out and just kind of bulldoze over all kinds of laws, take more control, really do more deregulation, and basically just kind of have their way on how America gets its information. And that's wrong, right? Now, we understand that they have a fiduciary duty to, maximize profits for their shareholders, but there also needs to be that balance, that balance of consumer interest, right? Consumer safety. Those are the things that I think that are not being had here. And, you want to get right to it, right? The COVID pandemic essentially yanked back the curtain. For all the hurt and the pain that dereg caused, for all the hurt and the pain that the pandemic caused, right? What it did is it actually shone a light on what was going on, right? How deep the digital divide was. And the fact that millions of kids, mostly Black and brown kids, right? Mostly low-income families, were not able to get connected all these years, right? We're talking about 10 years running. This just didn't happen, right? The last year, with the pandemic. This has been an ongoing strategy that the telecommunication industry here in California, right, was actually given deference to price, set prices to whatever they wanted it to be, to put the technology wherever they wanted to put it. In fact, it was codified into law here in California. It's called a Public Utilities Code 710, actually codified the commingling of wired business along with wireless businesses. And what that did is that stripped out all of the financial incentives to build out the fiber optic. They were supposed to go in and actually replace all of our copper wire with fiber optic wire, and thereby giving everybody this, world-class telecommunications service, right? But what we found out is that there was these reports that showed that this law that was passed in 2012 here in California actually incentivized the communication industry to redline these communities, right? They said, like, okay, we are financially incentivized that we don't have to put this technology in these low-income areas because our fiduciary duty requires us to maximize profit. And if we do that, we're not going to be maximizing profit, right? And so the collateral damage, if you will, right, of Black and brown kids not being able to connect was simply that, right? Was simply just an acceptable consequence for the industry. And there was nothing on the other side, right, that was balancing the industry's interest, right? You had the consumer interests that were just essentially being bulldozed over, and we found out through the pandemic that these guys were not getting our low-income communities did not have access. And now you have the industry coming in saying, hey, we can solve this, and for folks like myself, right, it's brazenly offensive, right, for them to come out and say we can fix the very problem that we created, right, and saying that what we need is more of the stuff that you've given us already, which is deregulation, in order to do this, so that we can continue to bulldoze over consumer interests, right? So what we've learned through all of this, right, is that the industry cannot be trusted to close the digital divide, right? And that their commitment to build out a world-class telecommunication infrastructure is very suspect because, to my knowledge and to my colleagues' knowledge, across the country, there's really no plans on deploying 5G in low-income communities anyway, because they're not even going to be able to afford it. Now, that aside, 5G is third-rate technology, right? So what do I mean by that, right? Admittedly, that 5G is 100 times faster than 4G technology. That's true, and that seems like, wow, I have 4G right now, and I have a chance of getting something 100 times faster. And you're thinking like, well, that's great. But when you match it up against what fiber optics can do, right? It's 10,000 times slower than what the fiber to the premises could do. And that is, when the telecommunication industry is saying, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to bring 5G to everybody, we're again, best case scenario is we're shortchanging the very communities that they're intending to help, right? By not giving them the fiber optics that they should be having, right? So that's the biggest problem. And the other thing with 5G is that there's so many challenges with it. If wireless technology was truly a solution in closing the digital divide, we would not have had the gigantic challenges that we had where here in California again, 40% of our kids were not even able to attend school on a regular basis because they couldn't connect, right? Now, there isn't a high school kid that I know, right, that doesn't have a cell phone. So if wireless technology was so great and so good, I don't think we would have had that many children not being able to connect to do, schoolwork, right? So you have already evidence that's already in the record, if you will, right? That says, wireless technology is not the best. And now when you do the comparison through these studies, right, that have been done by EFF, they show that, yeah, 5G is faster than 4G, but it's 10,000 times slower, than fiber optics. And when you combine that with, the health concerns, the cancer causing, studies show that 5G wireless technology causes cancer. These are federally funded studies. And that, the idea of giving the industry, more dereg deference, and, there's no way there's no incentive for them to make it affordable. So even with full on 5G deployment in all of these communities, right? The very people that can't afford the internet today are going to be those same people that aren't going to be able to afford 5G down the road. And we're not even going to talk about the privacy issues and all of that. But that's my long answer. Sorry.
Well, so you've been working on digital equity and connecting people who don't have connected for many years. Can you tell me about what communities need in order to connect to the internet? Because what's being stated in our community is that we got to bring in 5G and give companies full reign of everyone's front yard so that kids aren't going to be going to McDonald's to connect to Wi-Fi to go to school. That's what's being put forward here and in communities across the country. So what do families need?
Yeah, all the families need, we need, to really get at the core of it, we need more competition, right? The fact that the issue is this particular industry is monopolized in the way that it is, and it's under a deregulation regime, right? The fact that it's under a deregulation regime means that, they can do basically whatever they want to do. There's nothing that forces them to set fair pricing. There's nothing then that says, okay, these folks can get it, but these folks cannot get it. There's nothing there. And so the fact that there's no competition means that prices, and so how they do it, how the industry does it, right, is that they say, okay, here's the territory we intend to serve, and they get all their, the three of them together, AT&T, Verizon, the other guys, right? And they say, okay, we're going to divvy up this area. You get this spot, we get that spot, and you get this spot. But, don't charge under $100 a month, right? So we agree to do that, right? And we can do that because there's no regulation that says we can't do that. And so without competition, right, with nobody able to compete, to say, hey, I have the same service, but it's like, 30% of what you guys are trying to charge. So the fact that affordability has been elusive, right, has kept the fact that there's no competition, rather, that has kept affordability elusive for many of our communities is at the crux of the problem, right? They need affordable broadband. That's the bottom line. And what we found out, over the last 10 years, right, is that it has to be safe. I mean, it's like all of a sudden, all of these studies, I think there's like 1,000+ studies that say that, all of the challenges that wireless causes from a health perspective, from DNA damage to cancer, to mitochondria interruption, to breaking the cell membranes, to entering the brain of a small child, and all these numerous challenges that wireless studies, thousands of studies that have been proven that it's harmful. Our kids need to be safe, right? They need to be safe first and foremost. I mean, they may have the 5G tech. Let's say, for example, they have 5G technology, right? There's some way able to, some kind of discount that allows them to afford that. But they're not in a safe environment, right? So kids need to have the wire technology. Our families need to have wire technology, and it needs to be affordable. And the thing is, it's not, I mean, for so many years, and I've been saying this for, 10 years plus, right? Is that, or it's not, it's that the technology, internet to the home, right, is no longer a luxury. It's as common as, a food to eat, a meal in the morning, glasses to read a book, water that runs, so they can have running water, lights that go on, high-speed internet, high-speed broadband, fiber optic to the home is on that same level. It's the same need that our households should have. There's no reason why they shouldn't have that information coming to their house. And the thing is that the industry, right, initially set out to replace all of our copper wires with fiber optics. They actually set out to do that, and they were given extreme deference. They were able to raise rates. I mean, you'll remember that our landline rates, early 2000s, were about $12 to $15, right? Today, we can't get into a landline for under $65 a month, right? And the reason is that the government gave the telecommunication industry extreme deference to raise rates on the idea, on the promise, right, that they were going to replace all of the copper wire with fiber. And they didn't do that, right? And there's studies that have been published, and there's a group called the Regulators that's based out of New York that fought the FCC on this, right, and won, right? They found out that the states were utilizing an accounting system that was outdated and that they did not need to, but in so using that accounting system, it allowed the incumbent telephone providers to not deliver on these promises that they were making about deploying the fiber optic network that they were supposed to be doing, given that they were getting the rate increases that they had been asking for. So it gets very, complicated, but the crux of the issue is that it's really very simple, right? We cannot give industry more leverage. They don't deserve it, and they've proven that when they've gotten it, right, they failed us miserably, right? I mean, just look at the millions and millions of kids who were not connected.
Right.
Thought, they were going to be connected.
Right.